So for today, what I have is a bit of a different video. It is going to be a tier list video of all dispatch characters. First up, we have Spawn Blazer, and she's only up here like this just because she doesn't have a bit more development as other characters. Once you get to about episode 4-ish, you kind of really don't see a bit more development than I would like and than I'm used to for these types of characters and these types of games. But she is a really good character. I do like it. It's just out of relationship with Mom Man and out of just not having the greatest development throughout the story, unless if you don't go on that date with her, then you get revealed that her power is coming from her amulet later on in the story. Then it's a bit more spread out, but she doesn't really have too much development in the story, nor is she as important as other characters in the story. But she's definitely not a bad character, but she doesn't deserve to have a higher spot probably than B, but she's not low enough to be C. So she's at a good mid-tier B spot for now, I would think. Up next, we do have a character that I'm a bit more connected to and appreciate a bit more, but is not high enough to go in the higher tiers. And for that, this character is going to be Sonar. Sonar really doesn't have too much of a outstanding appearance as a villain. In the game, you really learn that he's not really a violent type. He has his bat form, his normal form. His bat form is a bit more brute strength, while his normal form is a bit more smarts. Also in the comics, you learn that he's not really like a violent type. He's not really a villain like fit in. And if you choose the ending to where it turns out that he is working with Shroud, his fight is a bit more like cooler, but it's not really a villain fight. Like, you can tell he's not built for being a villain, and the comments in that fight make it so. He's more or less of misguided person trying to find his way back, and he deserves to find his way back. And Brownie Point is voiced by Moist Critical, who takes his character's relatableness and funniness up a notch. He's a very cool guy for Sonar, and Sonar is a very cool guy himself, which in my playthrough I chose not to kick him, and it shows definitely because I think he's more of a chiller guy to relate to than Coop is, and I think this is why he deserves a B spot, just because he's not really like a villain per se. He doesn't develop too much, but he also has a really good stable line of what his character is, and on top of that, he's voiced by Moist Critical. So on to the next one. For our next character coming up, he doesn't really have too much of a good spot on this tier list, but he's not a bad character at all means. And this character is going to be Golem. Golem himself, as I said, isn't really a bad character. He just doesn't have too many lines in the game. You can gain enough lines through playing the dispatches and finding out who he is, but you don't really see too much of that. You see him in action. You see him at, he's pretty cool, pretty funny. Pretty much more tamer guy because he's on the younger side. But there really isn't an outstanding quality about him that I can think of. Like, every other character has an outstanding quality, like they're rather hot-headed, or they're more mature, or they're nice, empathetic. There really isn't you could probably say chill, maybe, for him. But other than that, I don't really see a outstanding trait for him. And he doesn't have too much lines to go off of. The only stuff that he does in the game, which give him good points towards him, is helping us with Flambe, and additionally standing up for Invisigal in episode 7. But other than that, he really doesn't have too much to go off of, so I got to keep him at B tier at most. For the next character on my list is going to be this Goopish guy. I have no clue what his name is. I'm probably going to put it on screen now. But he doesn't really have a good spot. Like, he doesn't really do too much, and he only is in the first, and I'm pretty sure the last episode that we see of him. We don't really get to see too many lines of him. He's a funny character, don't get me wrong, but we don't really see him otherwise, and for that, he's probably just got to stay in C tier. And speaking of characters that are going to be not really too shown often, it's going to be along with him and Shroud. So we'll get to that in one moment. Next up on my list, as I said from the previous character, is going to be Shroud. Shroud isn't really seen in the game too much until the end, which is my problem. Shroud is being built up to this big bad, he's really smart, he predicts everything, and we only really see him actually, we see him in episode 6, but we don't get to see who he is and his development in the story until episodes 7 and 8, which is the last 2 episodes of the entire game, which is his downside. We don't really get to see too much of him, and we don't really get to see why he does the things he do. We do get to see only a little bit of that in the comics if you get the deluxe edition, but other than that, we don't really get to see a lot of time of Shroud being built up. A good example of how they could have done it, instead of him being in episode 6 at the end and not saying anything, they could have added some lines. Maybe they also could have made him a bit more prevalent in episode 6, to where it was like a Red Ring hideout, and that they could have made, he was maybe in there and they should steal it and such. But he is voiced by Matthew Mercer, which is a really great actor. Really, really great actor. So he doesn't get a brownie point for that. But he doesn't really do too much that far in the story, or develop too much in the story, to where he makes him a really good character. So for that, he's going to have to go and see, not really too much higher than that. Up next is this character right here. He's only going on C tier just because he's just a background character a little bit. He's that character that's just there. He's enough to not be a random background character, but to be a defined background character, to where he has a little bit of a background to him, and he stands out a bit more than all the other non-name characters and such. But he doesn't really do too much. He's just there. He adds a bit more funny to the scene, or a bit more like emotion to it. He doesn't really do too much, so for that, I don't have nothing really to go off of. So he's only going to be in C tier for the time being. The next character on this list is going to have to be Phenomenon. Now, Phenomenon, the reason why he is going to be at C tier is due to the fact that he is first brought into the game as Blonde Blazer's boyfriend, and is being built up when you first do the very, very first dispatch, when you get the goggles on the billboard, to be this Superman-like character, and he'd be able to throw the Earth in the darkness if he really wanted to, by absorbing the sun's power and such. But you really don't get to see that as much as you would want. You only really get to see a side of him that probably not a lot of people knew, and a very depressed side of it, just because he only saw Blonde Blazer as Blonde Blazer and not Mandy. The only time you really get to see him fight a bit more is during the final episode of Dispatch, where he does fight against Shroud, but at the same time, he really doesn't develop any past that. He really doesn't. He's very neutral in any of the choices you make because he's an alien. He's very much neutral in any of the conflicts and stuff. But he's still a superhero. He still saves lives, but he's a bit underwhelming. He does get pushed up in the space or the sky, however you want to see it, because he doesn't come back for a lot by Shroud. And I do think he is a bit more nerfed in this sense. And if they did get more of a route, like a Superman route from him, then I'm pretty much sure he would have been higher. But for now, he has to stay at C tier. Now, for a disclaimer, these characters aren't in any specific order, but in next is going to be Coop. Coop is in B tier just because of the fact that she does have a bit more development with starting out as a villain, and you do get to see her develop a bit more into a superhero a little bit if you don't kick her off the Z team. But she does get more points for being more of a villain than Sonar does if you kick her off the Z team. You can actually see her as a villain if you kick her off a Z team than you do Sonar. Her fight is a bit more natural sense because of this, and you don't really think oh no, she's not really meant to be a villain, or she's not really meant to be menacing. You can actually feel it a little bit through her dialogue. And on top of that, she only really talks about killing and assassinating people, far as much as I know. The only other thing that she really tries to talk about too much of is stuff with Punch Up, and that's it. There really isn't too much more she'll talk about and develop from that, but she still is a villain on the Z team that wants to develop, wants to become a superhero, wants to be a better person. So for that, I gotta put her at B. And none of these characters are in an order like B1, B2, or whatever. They're just in these solid spots as is. And I think she's at a good spot at B. And let's go on to the next one. Now we move on to A tier with the next couple ones, with first being Royd. Royd is a really good character in the story. You meet him in episode 2 in the bathroom, and you could already tell that he's going to be a very joyous character to work with, just because of the matter of fact that he is this uproot guy, and he is very energetic, very friendly. He's willing to work with you, and one of the only few people at that time that knew you were Mecha Man, and still did not tell a single soul. He's a very trustworthy person, and he helps out with being that stable guy in the story, to where if you know he's on the screen, you know it's probably a good scene, or he's gonna be a staple of like his opinion you should probably take to heart. Like when he's in the downstairs with Robert, and Visigow, he does bring up a good point about Visigow coming down, hiding stuff, having the astral pulse, and he's that one devil on your shoulder that's saying to not trust her, while the other one is Visigow saying to trust her. So very good person. He is very energetic. He's just a really cool guy, like just a really upstanding guy. On top of that, he shows lore just throughout one conversation, and it tells us what type of person he is and who he was and who Robert's dad was. Because earlier in the story, he reveals that Robert's dad was not a science nerd, because he can tell a science nerd when he sees one. And his dad was more of a gearhead, like that likes to build stuff. So it tells us a little bit more about who Robert's dad was, the origins of the astral pulse, and what type of person Royd was before all this. Because this conversation did happen because Robert's dad did take Royd, and because he was a villain back then, and to bust him. So for that, I'm going to put Roy at A tier, and this isn't any specific order, as I said. This is just some regular tiers. So let's move on to the next one. The next one on this list is going to be Malevola, and the reason why I say this is because she has around about a really good personality in the scenes that you do see her in, and all of those scenes are usually pretty witty and pretty cool. And I do like the relationship she does have with Sonar, as her being really good friends with him, wanting them both to improve, and trying to look out for Sonar because she knows that he's not really a bad person or meant to be a villain because of his non-violent crimes. So she has this really good relationship, willing to help a friend out and willing to do it with, willing to improve, willing to become a better person with said friend, and with said family being the Z team later on. Her design is really cool. She has really cool lines, and I do think that she is one of the better characters in the story that does add a bit more layers to the scenes that she's in just by the way she expresses herself. And when you do see her express herself very differently, you know it's pretty serious or a pretty emotional event because of how laid back she usually is. So for that, I have to put her at A, and I think it's a good spot for her. And let's go on to the next one. The next person up on the tier list, and that goes in A tier, is going to be Prism. Prism is such a funny character in the series. And every single scene that she is in, I know I'm going to get a giggle or a laugh out of, just because of how energetic and good her character is. And she brings that laughter to the party. And with her having such a unique power, and you get to see it in the bar fight, with her being able to blind people, make copies, and then even at the end, at episode 8, being able to make constructs where she's able to physically be on, constructs that can redirect things, and she's able to use light as finger pistols. Very creative power, very, very funny lines, and on top of that, being able to sing and be a charismatic person like that. Just really funny, really all-around good character. So I think she deserves to be at A tier. And as I said, none of these are in order. They are just in tier order. So if you do think something else, let me know. And while you're at it, like, comment, subscribe, and let's go on to the next one. The next one up on the list that goes in A tier has to be Flambe, because Flambe is a more of a character that we see first on the Z team in episode 1, and he's introduced to us as this guy that's a bit of a douche, and he wants to fight us, and he doesn't think we're worthy enough to be a hero as a Mecha Man, and he we're not it, just very, very rude and disrespectful. But as the story goes on, we do get to see a bit more of a better side of him. And if you do choose the option to reveal the team that you're Mecha Man, he does try and kill you, but is stopped and then flies away. His character development is very much there's a lot to go off of and to improve off of. So you do get to see that in the game. He goes from this very disrespectful and, not caring guy to wanting to care about his teammates, willing to sit down and talk about the needs of the Z team, and willing to come in and forget Robert as Mecha Man. Even though it will take time, he's willing to forgive him. And he's also the only other person that's willing not to kick Invisigirl off the team if you do choose to review yourself as Mecha Man. And since he's willing to go that far, usually at that point, you would have never seen that in episode 1, him actually caring about somebody other than himself. And I think that deserves to be, for him to be put at A tier. And I like his character development throughout the entire game. And I do think he's very, very funny and perfectly matched for his voice and his design. So it adds a bit more of a better layer to his scenes, even if you like the scenes and or not. But for that, he gets put in A tier. The next character that comes up on the list that's going to be going in A tier has to be Punch Up. Punch Up is a pretty good character. He's very, very funny, and he is a very charismatic character that you do get to see, but I don't really see him as a villain much in the game. He is a villain, but I don't really see him as one. But he has really good scenes and really good chemistry with Coop, which you do get to see in there in the game. And then he also does have a very much Rage Baitish personality a little bit, especially when seeing him in the meeting with him in Prism. And on top of that, whenever you get to see them during the Z team meeting when discussing to kick Invisigal, with him having a different opinion on kicking Invisigal or not. So you do get to see this more of a deeper guy when it comes to these types of stuff. And if you do read the comics, you do get to see him explored a bit more and a bit more sensitive to a toe. And I think that he deserves to be up here with every other character here on A tier. As I said, not in any order, just pretty good right here. And also for a brownie point, he is voiced by Jacksepticeye. So gotta give it there. Now let's go on to the next one. Now, with next up on this list are going to be S tier characters that I think deserve the spotlight and are most important in the story and to me. So for this part, we are going to go up first with Waterboy. I think Waterboy is a very, very good character and has a lot to develop off of. I think that he starts out as a very timid, very not confident guy, and that is explained to you once he joins the Z team and is put in the janitor's closet. And he has a very relatable personality to a lot of people just because of him not being confident in himself and him doubting whatever he does, not being too sure, stuttering all the time. And it makes it so that he deep down is this guy that, doesn't think he has the powers to be a superhero and sometimes doubts his need to be a superhero. But as the game goes on, and when you talk to him in the janitor's closet, you get to see a more confident and clear guy speaking, and it's the little details that'll show that he becomes more confident in using his powers, more confident in his speaking, and more confident in his attitude, just because of when you go and give him that pep talk and surround him by people who also want to improve themselves, that brings him up a notch as well. With one of the golden points being that you wouldn't really think he'd be a violent type guy, which he usually isn't, but his development goes as far to throwing a chair at a vending machine because of his frustration towards the matter of fact that Invisigal caused Chase's impossibilization. And you really wouldn't think that he'd do that, but through the growth of the game, his attachment to his friends, the Z team, he gets that extra boost of development that attaches you to his character and to the team a bit more than all the other characters on this list. So that's why I think he deserves S tier. Next up on our list that goes in S tier has to be Robert Robertson III. And the reason why he goes up here on S tier is depending on what ending you go for, which in my personal opinion, I think the best ending to go for is the good ending with Visigal turning to heroism. If you are able to get that ending and able to fully live your story and forgive whoever Z team member went rogue, I think you're able to see the full picture of who Robert is. Robert Robertson is a guy who lost everything, basically. He lost his family. He lost his job as Mecha Man. He lost his legacy as Mecha Man. And the only thing that he had to himself at one point was his dog Beef. The only thing he had to himself. But as time goes on, we do get to see him a bit more develop and finding a reason to come to be a hero and come to work and to improve these people that want to be heroes, because he sees that they can. He sees people that can be redeemed. He sees people that, even though on the outside, they're villains and that they're not really doing it as a superhero would, he sees them doing it in their own way. He sees them doing good in their own way, and he knows that they can. And he's willing to change how he does stuff and how SDN does stuff, because he knows that they're deserving of having a chance at redemption and atoning for whatever they did as a villain. So he's willing to go that far, and additionally, he is willing to sit with every single one of them and show them and guide them to being a superhero. Additionally, on top of that, Mecha Man isn't what made him a superhero. Mecha Man is just the title that he has as a superhero. Even without the suit, he is a upstanding guy that fights for his friends and family, and he shows mercy to Shroud by not killing him, and which I think is the actual ending. He shows that he's willing to put aside how he feels and is willing to do the right thing no matter what, and he's willing to be patient, and he's willing to give people second chances after second chances, because he believes that it's the right thing to do and that people should have second chances and not be defined by what they did in their past, and have them defined about what they do now. So for that, I have to put Robert Robertson in this tier. And I will say for Robert Robertson and Chase and Invisigal, which are the next two ones I'm going to rank, you could write an entire essay on them, on how good they are as characters. Just because they made these three characters specifically so good to a T, it is mind-blowing. You sometimes won't see it initially, but you are going to be able to see it as you play the game. And if you notice the little stuff, and if you notice just what other people say about them and how they get a reaction out of them. Now, we're going to put Chase at S tier. Chase is a really good character just because we were introduced to him as Trackstar, a guy who's known for super speed, but the caveat to his super speed is that whenever he runs, he ages more faster than a normal person. So his mental age stays the same, but his physical age of his body can't handle the speed, so it ages itself. As I said, you could write an entire essay on him, but the key points to his character is that he starts off as this guy that doesn't like Z-Team. He outwardly says he doesn't like Z-Team. He would have cut Invisigal if he had the chance to, if he had the option to. He would have not cared about any of these guys because he has been a superhero before, so he knows they can't be one. But as the game goes on, you do get to see that he doesn't really mean these stuff. And he actually does believe in them and that he starts to tolerate them a little bit. And where he shines at the most is in episode 6. In episode 6, you get to be in a house party. And this house party is thrown by Invisigal, Blonde Blazer, basically the entire Z-Team, except for the villains. And in this house party, Chase gets drunk and starts to argue with Invisigal over being a superhero and telling her that she's not a superhero and that she is basically boot of scum and she'll never be one because he's seen it before and she needs to stop dragging other people down with her. And even with Robert failing to do the Mecha Man test, and Chase even tells him to stop being with Invisigal because she's like a black hole and that she sucks everything around into her out of their lives. But even with all this considered, when it came down to the line of being a superhero, he does it anyway. He has a conversation with Robert after the house party ends horribly about why do they do the things they do and why are they superheroes. And they come down to it because they're superheroes because it's the right thing to do. They enjoy being superheroes and helping out others, and it's wired in their brains that that's what they should do. And they, from this conversation, realize that that's it for them. Like that's their purpose in life. They enjoy doing that, and it reminds Chase of what he should be doing in that time and how he should be going about viewing Z-Team. Because later in that episode, when Invisigal is about to initially die in that episode, when it came down to it, with knowing the risk, with knowing what's on the line, and knowing if he used his powers one more time, he could possibly die, he still went anyway and did it. He still used his powers. He still enjoyed using his powers, not only because of super speed, but enjoyed being a superhero again. Just having that feeling of helping out someone just because it's the good thing to do and because everyone deserves a second chance. He enjoys that feeling and he enjoys everything that comes with it. Now, the final character, as you've just seen right now, is put in S tier, is Invisigal. Invisigal, as I said, can have an essay written on her as well. She is a character that has a lot of layers and can be very difficult to understand. I probably don't even understand her fully as well when I talk about her in this video. Just for all I've played and seen, I'm going to relate to, and try to explain. But let's go off of how she is in the beginning. When we're first introduced to Invisigal, she is peeping on the conversation that Blazer and Robert have about being introduced to SDNN, changing in the work clothes and stuff, and talking about the kiss that if you did share with Blonde Blazer in the first episode. And she's seen as a person that doesn't value privacy. Later in these episodes, somebody that is violent, not all put together, very rude, and doesn't respect other people, and is still clinging to her villain side. But once you go on in the episodes, and once it comes down to her being cut, you get to see her more vulnerable side as time goes on. With the first instance being her wanting to give up on herself because she knew that she was going to get cut. And she defines herself based off of what the typical superpowers that somebody invisible would have. She defines her powers as being villain powers because it's more useful as being a villain than it is being a superhero. And Robert explains to her that it doesn't matter what you define those powers to be. You define who you are and what your powers are by the actions you do now. And you shouldn't give up on yourself because nothing's ever sealed. Your fate is never sealed. It's what you make it. And within that episode, she proves to herself that that's true. She gets an opportunity. She gets to get I don't even know what the guy's called, but she gets to get back on the guy from the donut shop. And it's shown that she enjoys doing this. She enjoys having a second chance being a superhero by taking a picture of the leaderboards. And enjoys. I gotta yawn. Oh my god. But she enjoys being this person that people are trying to build her up to be. And she thanks Robert for that. And in the next episode, starts having feelings for him because one of the only few people that actually reaches out to her and is actively fighting to change her in her life. So if you go on the date with Invisigal to the movie, this is a very underrated note that people really don't understand, and that's the choice of snack that they have. They have a bunch of snacks, usually in games. If they want to do an on-brand snack but don't want to name it, they'll do an off-brand of it, and you'll usually find it in these games. But they very specifically keep Sour Patch Kids in there like an actual thing. They keep that in their full name drop and everything. Most people will be like, that's fine, Sour Patch Kids, it's a movie theater, whatever. But Sour Patch Kids' motto is first they're sour, then they're sweet, which is Invisigal's personality. First, when we meet Invisigal, she's very sour, has a sour personality, rude, egregious, all the 9 yards. But then once we get to actually know her and stick by her through her journey to grow as a superhero, we do get to see her tame down and become sweet, more nicer to us, more calmer, and actually, want to be friends with us and go even a bit further on what line of story you go through. So that's a good attention to detail. Additionally, later on through the game, when you decide to have the house party, she does it on her own accord. She helps initiate the house party because she cares about Robert. She wants Robert to be Mecha Man again. She wants him. She's gone to the point where she cares about him enough to risk her life by herself, even when they told her not to, just because she knows Robert wants to be Mecha Man that badly, and she knows she doesn't want to have him being stuck behind a desk for the rest of his life. Going there, risking her life for the Astro Pulse, even when stuff goes wrong and the team wants to kick her, she admits that what she did was a mistake and that she's at fault. And when the team wants to kick her from the team, and if you defend her, she goes to the locker room and tries to even push you away even more, because all her life people have done is define her as a super villain. They haven't defined her as anything else in her life, and so she thinks she's not deserving of love or atonement or redemption. So when Robert comes to her and reverses all these things she's thought that she's said about herself for her entire life, it changes her. You do get to see her a bit more broken down. And the one quote that people don't really realize is that when she says she wants you to look at her like you see Blonde Blazer, she means two things. One, yeah, she does like Robert, but at the same time, she wants Robert to look at her as a superhero, as a role model superhero, because nobody else has for her entire life. And depending on if you go the romance route for Invisigal, which I think is a true ending, you do get to see her, even with the backstab betrays where she takes the Astro Pulse, where it's revealed that she's working with Shroud, even after after the fact that she put the bomb on Mecha Man. You do get to change her mind to where she thinks it's worth it enough to risk her own life for a person that she didn't have to. She went out of her way to risk her own life to do it. She went out of her way to risk everything she's built for somebody else that probably needed it at the time but wasn't necessary. She didn't need to do that. It was very much optional for her to step in front of the bullet when Shroud fired that gun, but she did it anyway because Robert was a great mentor to her and showed her that she was more of deserving of love, atonement, and redemption, that she deserves all these things, and that she should affirm all these beliefs, positive beliefs that people are telling her, and stop dragging on with her past, that she's not worth anything. Now, I will say this. These are the listings I have for all these characters, and these aren't in a specific order, but in one moment I will cut to a point where I will make them into a specific order, so just so you can see if what my opinion is on it, and if you want to discuss it in the comments. Now, I've rearranged the order to where I think they go S1, A1, A2, A3, and the order that I think these characters should be in the story, and I hopefully believe that you think so too. This was more of a different video than I usually do. I hopefully have more dispatch videos. I enjoy making these videos, and I really like that you guys are supporting me through this, even if it's just 40 people, even if it's just 30 people. Seeing people watch my videos is what keeps on making me going. So if you have any improvements or comments, criticisms, or any just words of encouragement, please let me know. They do help. And without further ado, hope you guys have a great night. Thank you for your time, and see you in the next one. Probably dispatch video. So goodbye.